The recent 57th Congress of the Grassland Society of Southern Africa provided a platform to share cutting-edge science and practices in the management of the country's rangelands. Leading scientists, students, and industry experts came together to share their knowledge during this event. Stay tuned for insightful discussions with some of these experts. But first, over to Lisa for the latest agricultural news.
Standard Bank. It can be.
In vandag se nuus, minder gevalle van veediefstal is gedurende April tot Junie vanjaar aangemeld. 2 minder plaasmoorde is ook vir die afgelope verslagtydperk aangemeld, teenoor die ooreenstemmende 3 maande van 2021. Dit is volgens die jongste misdaadsyfers wat verlede week deur die minister van Polisie Bekkie Cele vir die tweede kwartaal van die jaar bekend gemaak is. Volgens Willie Klek van die Nasionale Veediefstal Voorkomingsforum toon die syfers 'n daling van 4,9% in die tweede kwartaal teenoor die ooreenstemmende tydperk verlede jaar. Limpopo, Gauteng en Noordwes het egter 'n klein toename in veediefstalgevalle getoon. Hannes Wolfaart van Giyani is onlangs vir die tweede keer as Agri Limpopo se jongboer van die jaar aangewys. Hy het hierdie kompetisie in 2018 ook gewen. Hannes en sy broer het in 2011 met 3 hektaar groen soetrussies begin boer. Teen 2022 het Wolfaart boerdery gegroei tot 'n besigheid van 30 hektaar soetrussies onder gespesialiseerde nethuise, as ook 26 hektaar tamaties en 42 hektaar sitrus. Hannes dring nou deur na die nasionale ronde wat later vanjaar gehou sal word. And a record amount of citrus exports recently left South Africa. 3 container terminals loaded a total of 2,099 40-foot equivalent unit containers destined for Europe. According to Michelle van Buren of Transnet Port Terminals, it was the first time in history that the port terminals loaded over 2,000 units of citrus containers onto a single vessel. She says the volumes were testament of the resilience amongst South African citrus growers to deliver their product despite the challenges in the industry. The last record of citrus export on a single vessel was 1,665 units in 2020. And that's today's news.
Ons is hier by die Werringsvereniging van Suidelike Afrika se 57ste kongres en ons gaan nou met professor Michiel Skols gesels oor sy toespraak wat hy gelewer het oor klimaatsverandering. Prof, jy het in jou toespraak genoem dat die landbousektor die enigste sektor is wat werklik iets kan doen in die stryd teen klimaatsverandering. Wat het prof hiermee bedoel?
Ja, baie dankie. Ons moet besef dat koolstofdioksied is die kweekhuisgas wat die meeste in die atmosfeer voorkom. Dit is ongeveer 50% van die kweekhuisgasse is koolstofdioksied. En koolstofdioksied het 'n baie lang lewe. Die bestaan tussen 100 en 200 jaar kan dit in die atmosfeer wees. So koolstof wat ons nou vrystel, gaan eers oor 100 of 200 jaar afgebreek word. So die oplossing is om die koolstofdioksied uit die atmosfeer te verwyder. Ons moet nie wag tot dit natuurlik afbreek nie. En een van die maniere om dit te verwyder is om dat die plante dit weer opneem. So die plante moet die koolstofdioksied uit die atmosfeer opneem en in die grond sekwestreer. En dit is hoekom ek sê landbou is belangrik, want byvoorbeeld as diere die gras vreet en daai gras moet hergroei, dan neem dit koolstofdioksied uit die atmosfeer uit op. So, dis nie net diere nie, maar plantproduksie ook. As ons die regte metodes toepas, dan kan ons eintlik in 'n negatiewe koolstofdioksiedketting ingaan en landbou kan koolstofdioksied uit die atmosfeer absorbeer en so help om klimaatsverandering teen te werk.
En in lig daarvan is dit nou nogals ironies dat landbou, spesifiek veeproduksie, altyd aangewys word as die sondebok wat klimaatsverandering betref. Wat kan prof daaroor sê?
Ja, ek dink dit kom van die aktiviste af, wat dit eintlik as 'n rede gebruik hoekom mense nie vleis moet eet nie. As ons byvoorbeeld die metaanproduksie van vleis vergelyk met die protaanproduksie van rysproduksie, dan is dit feitelik dieselfde. Maar niemand sê eet minder rys nie, maar almal sê eet minder vleis. En dis 'n manier wat die aktiviste gebruik om teen vleis te velde te trek. Die werklike bydrae van werkhouers tot die koolsuurgasse in die atmosfeer is maar ongeveer 4%. So hoekom breek ons nekke oor 4% en ons vergeet die 28% wat van die vervoersektor en die energiesektore vandaan kom. Hoekom konsentreer ons nie liewer daarop nie?
Daar het julle dit. Landbou is toe nou nie die sondebok in klimaatsverandering nie.
Jamie Paulse is from the University of the Free State and she's busy with a PhD study on regenerative agriculture or high density grazing in the more arid areas of the country. Now, Jamie, this whole concept of regenerative agriculture, high density grazing is actually not a straightforward thing. There's a lot of controversy about it. So what are the main questions that you want answered in the study?
Okay, so when it comes to regenerative grazing, we don't look at the agriculture because it involves a lot of concepts. So we look more at how they apply it on rangelands. So we look at how they increase the animal numbers, and they have several claims that it increases soil health and plant health, and subsequently, obviously, that influences the animal dynamics as well. And with animal dynamics, obviously, farmers are there to make money out of their farming systems. So we actually want to explore these claims. So we actually want to see how these applications influences soil. So we want to look at the soil quality and the nutrient status, as well as the physical characteristics, because if that changes, obviously it will influence the vegetation. So we will take it a step further and see what are the vegetation effects or influences. So with the vegetation or the plant component, we will look at the plant health as well. So the vigor, how much plant material will be produced, as well as the quality. Because as we all know, animal performance is influenced by the quality and how much food is available. So when we look at animal performance, we won't do any physical studies on the animal. So we actually want to look at, we want to interview the farmers and ask them, what is your animal performance? So we will ask them questions such as, what is your calving percentage or your conception rate? And obviously we will step a little bit into the financials, because everything obviously goes around the financials. So we're looking more into the semi-arid areas. So we will be looking at the Northwest Province, Central Free State and the Eastern Cape. So we will be focusing there, but we do have some studies that are moving more into the mesic areas, not fully mesic, so it's more on the borders of semi-arid and mesic.
If you say mesic, meaning the wetter areas.
Yes, the wetter areas. So that will be in Eastern Free State. So those are the several questions we actually want to answer. And like you said, it is a controversial concept. So I feel like it shouldn't be a neglected concept. So somebody needs to go into it and try to find the answers that we are looking for.
Because the fact is that there are many farmers, and it's a growing number, that are absolutely convinced of that this is the way to go.
Exactly.
Which brings me to the next point, and that is that you are working with people,
yeah,
and different areas, sure, but people with a, what shall I call it, a specific motivation.
Exactly.
That is a factor that you can't neglect either.
Exactly, because I mean, like you said, we're all working with people and they have different goals or objectives. So we have to take all of that into consideration as well. And we've seen, because the farmers we're working with as well, there are some that are only been doing it for 2 years, but there are some that are doing it for 30, 35 years. So something is working and we need to find out what makes those farmers successful. Because if it wasn't successful, they wouldn't be doing it for such a long time.
So it's a question of watch this space for the next 10
Exactly,
years or
watch
so.
this space, exactly, yeah.
That was Jamie Paulse from the University of the Free State.
We're now chatting to Dr. Nkabeng Mzileni from SANParks. Tell us, why are you here and why is this your passion?
I was invited to come and speak at the Grassland Association because some of my other colleagues have spoken here before, and South African National Parks has a very large footprint and we're responsible for national assets. So it's our responsibility to be transparent and give back the information of the activities that we're doing within the parks. So this was a perfect platform to come and have that discussion.
And let's chat about SANParks' mandate and how does that fit in with the struggle that is climate change?
The SANParks aims to protect and facilitate systems and processes. We try our best to try to stay away from numbers because that limits us to almost becoming a productionist mentality. So we try to facilitate how processes are going to work naturally in a system. Now, when it comes to climate change, we actually have a SANParks division that focuses specifically on that. And they look at the different areas that are vulnerable. So they have the climate vulnerable, and now how do we adapt to those places in those situations. And vulnerability is both from a people perspective and then from an animal, vegetation, wildlife perspective as well. As we were discussing, especially in the arid parks, Kgalagadi is one of the areas that's going to start experiencing more hot days. I mean, it's a desert and you're saying it's getting hotter and there's more hot days. That's definitely going to influence some of the animals there. So we're trying to be species specific and strategic about how we're going to interrogate what the issues are going to be in terms of climate change and how do we prepare for those species. With our talk today with Mokala, that was a base of a starting point of, okay, so this is how we're going to follow the process. And now we can spread it out to the different parks that we anticipate are going to start experiencing some issues with climate change.
ABE Biotech. Fermentasie is gelyk aan prestasie.
Welkom terug en kom ons kyk 'n bietjie na die rand hierdie week. Ek dink baie boere maak besluite rondom die rand. Ons het ook 'n currency view wat ons elke dag uitstuur spesifiek vir boere en vir invoerders en uitvoerders om hulle te help met die rand. En dit lyk so vir my op 'n weeklike grafiek of die rand sukkel om bo hierdie vlakkie van R17.13 te beweeg. Dit is amper asof die rand 'n bietjie sukkel. Maar as ek nou op die weekgrafiek kyk hier, dan lyk dit so vir my asof ons dalk werk aan aan 'n stygende wiggie. Nou ek weet nie of hy gaan uitspeel nie. Die stygende wiggie moet ongelukkig eers die rand onder 16.61 bring om die momentum na onder te bring. Op die oomblik is die momentum duidelik na opkyk. Die rand het van R14.60 hier van April maand af verswak na R17 waar hy nou is. En hierdie stygende wig is gewoonlik positief vir die rand, maar hy moet onder hierdie vlak van 16.61 breek om my positief te maak. En dan kan die rand dalk, as ons gelukkig is, dat ek net gou hier so 'n projeksie hier doen, hy kan dalk net gelukkig wees en ons vat na 'n vlak van R15.14, maar ek wonder, ek het so 'n idee dat hierdie rand ons gaan verbaas en dalk hier bo daai 17.12, 17.13 vlakke hoër begin beweeg en ek hoop van harte eerder versterking, want 'n hoër rand gaan beteken hoër dieselpryse, hoër invoerkostes op kunsmis en alle produkte, landbouprodukte en natuurlik dit gaan ook die voedselpryse onder druk sit, want dit lyk so vir my of Brent-olie al starrig hier bo die $95 per vat hou en dat hy nie eintlik wil versterk nie. Maar kom ons hoop hierdie stygende wig is reg. Ons sal hom weer so oor 'n week of 3 bekyk en dan kan ons kyk. Maar op die oomblik lyk dit vir my of die rand sukkel om bo 17.13 te verswak. Soek gerus ons webtuiste www.franseklerk.com vir meer inligting en ons gesels weer.
ABE Biotech. Fermentasie is gelyk aan prestasie.
Professor Kevin Kirkman is from the University of KwaZulu-Natal, and we are here at Aldam at the conference of the Rangeland Society, Grassland Society of South Africa. And we're talking about an easy measure for grassland management that he developed and he wants to illustrate here. The first thing I have to say, Kevin, though, is that we're in the wrong place because you did the most of your work on the high rainfall Sauerveld areas, and this is not where we are at the moment. But despite, please explain to us your story.
Thank you very much, Isak. When it comes to farming with livestock, to get optimal performance from your livestock, the most important aspect is to manage the quality and the quantity of the forage or the grass that your livestock have available to them. And to make a very complicated system simple to manage and simple to assess, we came up with the principle of using a long-term beer can. Now, I don't have a beer can with me, but I have a mug that is approximately the same size as a beer can. So the principle is, if you place the beer can in your grass, in the high rainfall Sauerveld parts of South Africa, the grass mustn't get much longer than this beer can in the summer growing season, because then quality starts to drop quite dramatically. So if you place your beer can and the grass is above that beer can, then that grass is already too long and is starting to lose quality. So you need to graze quite quickly. So that means you need to have a flexible grazing management system so that you can manage to ensure that your grass doesn't get taller than that. And you also don't want your cattle to go hungry. You want them to have good quality food, but you don't want them to grow hungry. So if you place your beer can on its side, the grass mustn't get much shorter than that, particularly for cattle. For sheep might be a little bit shorter, but for cattle can't graze grass much shorter than this beer can lying on its side.
So this grass is too short already?
This grass is getting a little bit too short, and in front of us here, that is still, there's enough for grazing. So they can go shorter than that to something slightly longer.
Probably here where you are there, most likely. Yeah.
That's closer, yes. That's about right. So for cattle, they can't actually wrap their tongue around and get a good mouthful when the grass is shorter than that. So if you keep it between that height and that height, more or less, it's a very quick and easy way of managing both the quantity and the quality of the forage that you're feeding your animals in summer. And it's important to note that this is for summer. When the grass is actively growing, you need to have a flexible system to manage that grass height.
Now, for summer, okay, so let's say you move the cattle from this, and obviously they have camps that they utilize.
Yes.
And you also talk about coming back to the same camp,
Yes.
And that is not a fixed system that you use.
Yes, you need to have a flexible system. So if you have a rigid system, you may have a camp coming up that you move your cattle into where the grass is already like that. That's too long. So rather leave that camp, let it grow out and ignore it. It will be a buffer in case of feed shortages later on. Rather find a camp where the grass height is correct, put the animals in, and they will have the right quality from the beginning. So you might ignore that. That's a forage reserve or a buffer. In wet years, you might have quite a few paddocks or camps like that. In dry years, you won't. But keep it flexible and make sure that you manage between that height and that height for quality and quantity during summer.
So if we number the camps 1 to 5,
Yes.
you are at number 3. Number 1 is ready again. You come back to number 1.
Yes, you'll come back to number 1, ignore number 4 and 5.
Yeah, and that becomes then winter fodder or
Yes.
in time of drought. Or
Yes,
something like
exactly.
that. Yeah.
Yes.
Viljoen. Ek is heidaglik aangestel by die Universiteit van Stellenbosch as 'n junior dosent en ek fokus daar op onkruidwetenskap, maar 'n gedeelte daarvan is ook aangeplante weidings en dis ook waarop ek my MSc gedoen het in 'n groot liefde, baie naby aan my hart. Ek kom oorspronklik van Ketberg af en ons bly heidaglik maar in Stellenbosch. So ons groot voorreg vir my. Ek is baie opgewonde oor hierdie journey vorentoe. Ons het juis oor die naweek 'n strategiese beplanningssessie gehad om te kyk hoe kan ons GSSA vorentoe vat en ons doel is om die vereniging te groei en op 'n volhoubare manier. So ons is besig om aan 'n klomp goedjies te werk en ons het 'n klomp hulle noem dit vital attributes wat ons vasgestel het en dit sal ons dan op fokus soos ons vorentoe gaan in hierdie jaar.
I'm Dr. Francois Deacon. I'm based at the University of the Free State. I'm there in the Department of Animal Science that used to be Animal, Wildlife and Grassland Sciences. And I'm on behalf of the university and also representing the Grassland Society this year as part of the organizing committee, so it's a real privilege being here. Yes, the entire conference, if you look at the quality of the presentations that came through, the excitement and the energy that came through with the youngsters, the new upcoming stars as researchers, and also the outgoing representatives, the old professors, the peers, the big publishers, and it's nice to see how they engage, how they get together. And one thing I'll definitely take from this conference is something I've always said in class. Not all classrooms are between four walls. And you can see that in the presentations. The moment the students get outside, they start observing, they interpret what's going on around them, and that's what they present then as science. And they try and understand that in our discipline, and they discuss that, and the talks we had on this conference was outstanding. And I've been to multiple international conferences, and I can tell you we're definitely on the same par as those ones.
BKB, die betroubare tuiste van landbou. BKB, the trusted home of agriculture. Elanco, we are driven by our vision of food and companionship enriching life.